Billionaire's son failed every test until the black janitor taught him one secret. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a Thursday morning when Ethan Royce, the son of the renowned billionaire owner of Royce Enterprises, sat nervously at the back of his private tutor's office. A thick stack of textbooks sat in front of him, the weight of his father's expectations pressing down on him more than any lesson could. Ethan was a young man, barely 20 years old, yet he had already been groomed to take over his father's empire one day. But today, like so many other days, he felt like a failure. No matter how many times he tried to pass the tests laid out before him, nothing ever seemed to stick. His mind would wander, and his thoughts never stayed focused long enough to get the answers right. This morning's test was no exception. Despite the luxurious surroundings of the private office, with its gleaming mahogany desk and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of defeat. The test he had just completed was for his business studies course, the one his father had insisted he ace in preparation for taking on his legacy. Ethan had spent weeks studying for this, but as he handed it in, he could feel the weight of disappointment already settling in. "You're going to have to try harder than this, Ethan," his tutor said with a sigh, as if this was yet another routine failure in his long list. "Your father expects you to excel, and this isn't enough. You have the money, you have the connections, but without the brains, it won't mean a thing." Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment. The word stung. He had been hearing the same thing for years, but it never seemed to get easier. As he sat there, trying to suppress the shame creeping in, he noticed something strange. A janitor was sweeping the floor outside the office, a middle-aged black man with a calm, focused demeanor. The janitor was always there, going about his work without a single word or complaint. Ethan had never paid much attention to him before. Who would? He was just a janitor, after all. But today, something felt different. The janitor's steady pace seemed almost meditative, as though he had mastered the art of mindfulness in the face of a demanding job. Ethan couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity. What did this man have that he didn't? The thought lingered as the tutor continued to speak, but Ethan's mind was no longer on the test or his tutor's words. He found himself watching the janitor, captivated by his quiet confidence. Finally, when the tutor had left the room for a moment, Ethan stood up, unable to resist any longer. He walked out of the office, and to his surprise, the janitor was still there, cleaning the hallway. "Hey," Ethan called, his voice unsure. The janitor looked up, meeting Ethan's gaze with an expression that was at once kind and knowing. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan continued, feeling a strange pull. The janitor nodded slowly. "What's your secret?" Ethan blurted out. "How do you stay so calm and focused?" The janitor set his broom aside and walked over to Ethan, studying him for a moment before speaking. "It's not about intelligence or wealth," he said quietly. "It's about discipline, focus, and knowing that no matter how many times you fail, you have to keep going. It's a mindset." Ethan felt a weight lifting off his shoulders as the janitor's words sank in. He wasn't expecting a magic answer, but this felt real. This felt like something he could actually use. "You really think I can do this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The janitor smiled, a knowing smile that seemed to hold decades of wisdom. "You've been trying to solve the wrong problems," he said. "Focus on the right thing, and everything else will fall into place." Ethan stood there for a moment, stunned. What had just happened? He had been struggling with tests, with expectations, with his own doubts, and yet, here was a man whose job was to clean, offering him advice that felt like it could change his life. As he walked back into his office, Ethan's mind was no longer clouded with the usual worries. For the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the answer he had been looking for wasn't in his textbooks or his bank account. Maybe it was in the wisdom of someone who had been overlooked, someone who understood the power of persistence, of learning from failure. Ethan had a lot to learn, but today, for the first time, he felt like he might just be ready to begin. As the days passed, Ethan found himself reflecting more and more on the janitor's words. At first, he tried to push them aside, telling himself that a janitor couldn't possibly know the struggles of a future CEO. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the feeling that there was some truth in what the man had said. The next few weeks were a blur of business meetings, family dinners, and corporate strategy sessions, but Ethan felt disconnected. He couldn't shake the thought that he was being groomed for something he didn't understand, something he didn't truly want. It was as if the very structure of his life, his father's expectations, the family legacy, the pressure to succeed, was starting to suffocate him. One evening, after another failed meeting with a potential investor, Ethan found himself back in that same office, staring at the same textbooks that had caused him so much frustration. The test results were no better this time around, and the pressure to live up to his father's standards weighed on him more than ever. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the janitor, the calm in the man's voice, the way he had shown Ethan that life wasn't just about having the right answers, but about having the right mindset. That was when Ethan decided to act. Instead of retreating into his usual routine, he did something he'd never done before. He went to the one place that had always felt unfamiliar, the maintenance hallway. Ethan had no idea what he was looking for, but the idea of talking to the janitor again, of learning from someone who had nothing to prove, was the only thing that gave him a sense of peace. When he walked into the hallway, the janitor was there, as always, sweeping the floor with a quiet determination. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then spoke up. "I need your help," he said, his voice softer than usual. The janitor stopped, looked up, and smiled, his eyes twinkling with understanding. "You've got something on your mind, don't you?" he said, putting the broom aside. Ethan nodded, sitting down on the bench nearby. "I don't know what I'm doing. Everything I've been taught, everything I've been told to do, doesn't seem to make sense anymore." The janitor nodded thoughtfully, leaning against the wall. "That's because you're trying to solve the wrong problems," he said. "You're focused on the wrong things. It's not about pleasing your father, or the investors, or anyone else. It's about finding your own purpose, your own path. When you start thinking for yourself, that's when things will begin to change." Ethan listened intently, his mind racing. "But what if I don't know what my purpose is? What if I'm just not good enough?" he asked. The janitor chuckled softly. "Trust me, everyone feels that way sometimes. The key is to stop measuring yourself by other people's standards. The only person you need to be better than is who you were yesterday. Focus on that, and you'll figure out the rest." The simplicity of the advice hit Ethan harder than any business strategy had. Here was a man with no formal education, no wealth, no high-status connections. Yet he spoke with the wisdom of someone who had lived through much more than most could ever imagine. Ethan felt something shift inside him. It was like a door had opened, just a crack, and he could see something beyond the corporate world that had always seemed so narrow. For the first time, he realized that there was more to life than meeting expectations. There was something deeper waiting to be discovered. The janitor stood up, picking up his broom again, ready to get back to work. "Remember this, son," he said, as Ethan stood to leave. "You'll never find your purpose by following the path others lay out for you. You have to carve your own." Ethan left the maintenance hallway feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The burden of his father's expectations, of his family's legacy, no longer felt like an anchor weighing him down. He still had a long way to go, but for the first time, he felt like he had a direction. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with the janitor's advice in mind, Ethan was ready to start walking it. The next morning, Ethan walked into his father's office with a new sense of clarity. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady and confident. "I don't want to just take over the company because it's expected of me. I want to make a difference, to find my own path, and bring something real to the table." His father looked at him for a long moment, surprised by the words, but not upset. Finally, he nodded. "I've always wanted you to think for yourself, Ethan. It's about time you started doing that." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew that the journey to finding them had just begun. Ethan had left his father's office that day feeling lighter, as if the world had shifted slightly off his shoulders. He had spoken his truth, for the first time in a long while, and his father had listened. The burden of expectation was still there, but it no longer felt suffocating. There was a newfound clarity in his mind, a spark that hadn't been there before. The janitor's words echoed in his mind as he walked through the halls of the family mansion. "You'll never find your purpose by following the path others lay out for you. You have to carve your own. Those words, simple but profound, had planted a seed of hope. Ethan didn't know exactly where his path would take him, but he was ready to find out. As he sat in his room that evening, the realization hit him. He had spent so much time trying to live up to other people's expectations, particularly his father's, that he had forgotten to listen to himself. But now, it felt like his mind was wide open, ready to explore the possibilities. Ethan spent the next few weeks reflecting on what the janitor had taught him. He began to make small changes in his daily routine, trying to break free from the rigid structure of his life. He spent more time reading books outside his normal business-related material, exploring topics that had always intrigued him but seemed unimportant in his world of corporate meetings and strategy. Philosophy, art, history, he devoured them all. It wasn't about learning for the sake of pleasing anyone anymore. It was about feeding his own curiosity, about discovering the things that made him truly passionate. One afternoon, as Ethan was walking through the city, he stumbled upon a small local cafe. It wasn't much to look at, just a humble little place with mismatched furniture and chalkboard signs. But something about it caught his eye. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. It felt like a world away from the polished offices and luxury that he was used to. He sat at a table by the window, ordered a coffee, and began reading a book on the history of art. The simplicity of the moment struck him. For the first time in ages, he felt at peace. This was the kind of life he had been craving. No pressure, no expectations, just the freedom to be himself. As he finished his coffee, Ethan looked up and saw a woman behind the counter, mid-30s, with a warm smile that seemed to light up the room. She had an air of quiet confidence, and there was something about her that felt familiar, almost comforting. "How's the coffee?" she asked, her voice soft but inviting. Ethan smiled and nodded. "It's perfect," he said. "Just what I needed." The woman laughed lightly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, I'm glad it's doing its job." There was something in her demeanor, something in the way she carried herself, that made Ethan feel like he wasn't just a customer. He wasn't just another person in a suit. He was someone who mattered, someone who was seen. She didn't know his background, his name, or his family, but in that moment, she treated him with the same warmth and respect as anyone else. "I'm Rachel," she said, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you." Ethan shook her hand, feeling a spark of connection. "Ethan," he replied, "I don't think I've seen you around here before." "I just started a few weeks ago," she said. "I'm trying something new. Wanted to get out of the corporate world for a while, you know?" Ethan couldn't help but smile. It was funny how things worked out sometimes. Here was someone who had made a similar decision to him. Someone who was also seeking a life beyond the expectations and pressures of the corporate grind. As the conversation went on, Ethan found himself opening up in a way he hadn't with anyone in a long time. He talked about his struggles, his doubts, and his desire to carve his own path. Rachel listened attentively, offering small words of encouragement. There was no judgment, no advice on how to fix things, just understanding. It felt good, this connection. As Ethan left the cafe that afternoon, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Maybe he was starting to figure things out. Maybe, just maybe, he was on the right track. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were still so many questions he didn't have answers to. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, on his own path, guided not by others' expectations, but by his own desire to find meaning and purpose. He knew that his journey was just beginning, and that the road ahead would be full of challenges and surprises. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He was ready to take the first steps, wherever they might lead. Ethan's life had begun to shift in small, but significant ways since that day in the cafe. He still spent his days in the corporate office, but his mind was no longer completely absorbed by spreadsheets, business meetings, and the weight of his father's legacy. The books he'd started reading, the conversations with the janitor, and even the simple exchange with Rachel had all planted seeds in his mind. He found himself asking deeper questions about life, success, and fulfillment. He no longer felt like he was simply going through the motions. He was starting to think for himself, to seek his own purpose. One evening, after a long day of work, Ethan found himself walking through the city streets again. The weather had turned chilly, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, casting an almost magical glow over the buildings. He passed by the familiar street corner where he'd first discovered the little cafe, and, without thinking, his feet carried him toward it. Inside, the warm smell of coffee and pastries greeted him as he walked in. Rachel was behind the counter, her easy smile lighting up the room as she saw him. "Hey, Ethan. Back for more?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with warmth. Ethan smiled back, feeling the tension from his day begin to melt away. "Yeah, I think I might have found my new favorite spot." "I'm glad to hear that," she said, handing him a steaming cup of coffee. As he sat down at his usual spot by the window, Rachel joined him for a moment, pulling up a chair across from him. "How have you been? How's everything going?" she asked, her tone sincere. Ethan paused for a moment, considering the question. The changes in his life had been gradual, but they had started to feel real. "You know, it's been strange," he said. "I feel like I've been living in this bubble for so long, doing what I thought I had to do. But lately, I've been questioning everything. I'm trying to figure out what I actually want, not just what's expected of me." Rachel listened quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. "That's a big step, Ethan," she said. "Most people never get there. They just keep going through the motions, stuck in the same routine. But you're doing the right thing by asking those questions." Ethan smiled faintly. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I do feel like something's changing, like I'm seeing things differently." Rachel leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "That's how it starts," she said. "The first step is always the hardest, but once you start questioning things, once you start really looking at the world around you, that's when the real growth happens." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Rachel's words had a way of cutting through the confusion he often felt. She wasn't telling him what to do or offering him easy answers. She was simply encouraging him to think for himself. For the first time in a while, Ethan felt like he didn't need to have all the answers right away. He didn't have to rush into his future or follow a predetermined path. "I'm thinking about doing something different," he said, his voice more certain now. "I want to start something on my own. Something that matters, something that's not just about making money." Rachel's eyes lit up. "That's amazing, Ethan. What are you thinking of doing?" Ethan hesitated, unsure of how to articulate his ideas. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "But I want to help people. I want to create something that makes a difference, something that's real." Rachel smiled, clearly impressed. "You'll figure it out," she said. "You already have the right mindset. And that's half the battle." The conversation drifted to other topics, but as Ethan listened to Rachel talk, he realized how much he had changed in such a short time. A few months ago, he would have never considered stepping away from the family business, would have never questioned his father's expectations. But now, he felt ready to explore new possibilities, to take risks, and to create something that was truly his own. That night, as he left the cafe, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't have a clear plan yet, but he knew he was on the right track. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt like it was his journey. He was finally ready to carve his own path. Ethan spent the next few weeks in a state of deep reflection. His mind had started to open up in ways he never imagined possible. The conversations with Rachel and the wisdom shared by the janitor continued to resonate with him. He no longer felt like he was trapped in a life that others had planned for him. He wasn't sure what exactly he wanted to do yet, but he knew that he wanted to do something different, something meaningful. One evening, as he was walking home from work, he passed by the little cafe again. He had become a regular, often spending time there to think, to plan, or simply to escape the corporate world that had once consumed him. Rachel greeted him with her usual warmth as he stepped inside. "Back for another cup?" she asked, flashing him a smile. Ethan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, I think so." He ordered his usual and sat by the window, lost in thought. He hadn't expected his life to change so quickly, but it had. It felt like the moment he decided to take control of his own path, things started falling into place. He was finally starting to see the world beyond the confines of his family's expectations. After a few minutes, Rachel joined him, sitting down across from him with her own coffee. "You seem quieter than usual today," she observed. "Everything okay?" Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking a lot about what I want to do next. I'm not sure yet, but I think I'm ready to make a change." Rachel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A change? What kind of change?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant for a moment. "I've been thinking about how I've been living my life. I've been going through the motions, doing what others expect of me. But now, I want to do something that feels real. Something that matters. I don't know what that is yet, but I feel like I need to find it. Rachel smiled, her eyes lighting up. That's amazing, Ethan. You're starting to find your own voice. That's a huge step. Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. It's funny. I've had all the money and connections in the world, but it's never felt like enough. I want to create something that isn't just about making a profit. I want to help people, make a real difference in their lives. Rachel looked at him with a mixture of admiration and encouragement. You'll figure it out. I can tell you're onto something big. Don't rush it. The path will show itself when the time is right. Ethan smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He was beginning to understand that success wasn't about following a pre-written script. It was about forging his own path and staying true to his values. The next few months were a whirlwind of change for Ethan. He started seeking out opportunities that aligned with his newfound sense of purpose. He met with nonprofit leaders, social entrepreneurs, and activists who were dedicated to making a positive impact on the world. With each conversation, he felt more certain that he was on the right track. One day, as he was attending a community outreach event, Ethan had an epiphany. He realized that the real purpose of his life wasn't about wealth or status. It was about giving back to the community and using his resources to support those who needed it most. He knew that he had the power to make a difference, and he was determined to do just that. As he continued to explore this new path, Ethan's relationship with his father began to shift. At first, his father didn't understand. He still expected Ethan to follow in his footsteps, to take over the family business and continue the legacy. But Ethan stood firm in his decision. He was no longer willing to live a life dictated by someone else's dreams. One evening, as they sat in the family's grand dining room, Ethan turned to his father. Dad, I know you've worked hard to build this empire, but it's not what I want. I need to do something that feels true to who I am. I'm not just going to take over Royce Enterprises because it's expected of me. His father looked at him, stunned. Ethan, you've been prepared for this your whole life. Don't throw it all away. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his father's words. I'm not throwing it away. I'm just choosing to build something that matters to me. I want to make a real impact on the world. It's not just about the money. There was a long silence, and for the first time, Ethan didn't feel the usual pressure to conform. His father sat back in his chair, looking at him with a mixture of pride and concern. I don't fully understand, but I respect your decision, he said quietly. Just promise me you'll do it right. No matter what you choose to do, make sure you do it with everything you've got. Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he knew he was on the right path. His journey was just beginning, but he was no longer afraid of the unknown. He was ready to take the next step, knowing that the road ahead would be his to create. Ethan had spent months forging his new path. His days of mindlessly following a predetermined course had come to an end. The path he was on now was filled with uncertainty, but for the first time, he felt alive, like he was carving out a future that truly belonged to him. He had taken the leap and left the family business behind. His decision was met with mixed reactions from those around him, particularly his father, but Ethan knew he couldn't stay in the shadow of the empire that had been built for him. He needed to build something of his own, something that reflected his values and passions. With every passing day, Ethan was getting closer to finding what that something would be. He had begun working with various nonprofits, community leaders, and social enterprises, focusing on giving back and creating change in the world. But there was one crucial piece missing: his own voice, his own vision. It wasn't enough to just work for others' causes. Ethan wanted to create his own cause, his own mission that would resonate deeply with him. It was late one evening when the idea first came to him. He was sitting alone in his apartment, reading through some reports from the charities he'd been involved with. The work was important, but something didn't sit right. He felt like he was putting a Band-Aid on a wound rather than addressing the root cause. That was when it clicked. What the world needed wasn't just more charity, more donations. What the world needed was empowerment. He needed to create an organization that didn't just help people survive, but helped them thrive by giving them the tools they needed to succeed on their own. He would create a foundation that focused on education, mentorship, and job training for underserved communities, particularly for young people who had been overlooked by society. The goal wasn't just to give a handout, but to give a hand up. Ethan knew this would be a huge undertaking, but he felt ready for it. His heart was in it, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right track. He reached out to some of the people he had met over the past few months, including Rachel, and began to flesh out his idea. They were all excited about the potential of the project. With Rachel's background in community work and his own experiences in business, they made an excellent team. Together, they started planning how to launch the foundation. The idea quickly gained momentum, and soon, they were meeting with potential partners, donors, and collaborators. The first few months were challenging, filled with endless meetings, paperwork, and planning. But Ethan could feel the energy in the air. This was his purpose, his calling. This was what he was meant to do. One day, as the foundation was starting to take shape, Ethan sat down with Rachel in that same cafe where it had all started. It felt like the perfect place to reflect. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" Ethan said, a smile tugging at his lips. Rachel looked at him, her eyes bright with excitement. "Yeah, we are. You've come so far since we first met. I knew you had it in you." Ethan leaned back in his chair, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You helped me see that it's not about following someone else's path, but creating my own." Rachel smiled, her expression warm. "You always had the ability. You just needed to believe in yourself. And now, look at what you're building." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling a rush of emotion. The journey hadn't been easy, and there was still much to do. But for the first time, he felt like he had found something that mattered, something that would make a real difference. His father's empire may have been built on wealth and power, but Ethan knew that what he was creating would be built on purpose, on a legacy of change and empowerment. As he looked out the window of the cafe, watching the world move around him, he realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but he was no longer afraid. He was ready to step into his future, ready to carve his own path, and ready to make the world a better place, one person at a time. Ethan's foundation was growing at an incredible pace. The idea he had once imagined as a small, hopeful dream was now turning into a full-fledged organization that was making an impact on the lives of so many young people. With Rachel's unwavering support and his own determination, they had begun to transform their vision into reality. It wasn't just about handing out resources. It was about empowering individuals, teaching them the skills they needed to succeed, and giving them the opportunity to create their own futures. Ethan had learned that true change came from within, and that's exactly what they were working toward. The foundation's first major initiative was a series of mentorship programs. These programs weren't about a quick fix or a one-time donation. They were about building long-term relationships with the young people they served, helping them navigate the complexities of life, and showing them that they had the power to change their own circumstances. They reached out to schools, local businesses, and even other nonprofit organizations to get the word out. Slowly but surely, people started to take notice. By the end of the first year, the foundation had already helped hundreds of young people gain access to job training, scholarships, and internships. Ethan felt a deep sense of pride as he looked at the success of the foundation, but there was still so much more to do. One afternoon, as he sat in his office reviewing reports, his phone rang. It was his father. Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Ethan," his father's voice came through, firm but not unkind. "I've been hearing a lot about this foundation of yours. I'll admit, I didn't fully understand your decision to leave the business, but it looks like you're doing good work." Ethan was taken aback. He hadn't expected this kind of response from his father. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm doing what I believe is right." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I've been thinking," his father continued. "I might not agree with everything you've done, but I see the impact you're making. I want to help." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Help? What do you mean?" "I want to support your foundation. I know my resources could help take it to the next level. I've built this company with hard work, and I want to put some of that to good use." Ethan didn't know what to say. This was a complete turn of events. For years, he had felt like he was in a constant battle with his father's expectations. But now, his father was offering to help him build something that was his own. "I don't want you to feel like you have to do this," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "I've been doing fine without the business resources." "It's not about the business," his father replied. "It's about what you're doing. I'm proud of you, Ethan. You've shown me that success isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference. You've found your purpose, and I want to be a part of that." Ethan sat in silence for a moment, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn in their relationship. He had spent so many years fighting against his father's expectations, but now, his father was offering his support, not just as a business partner, but as someone who truly understood the importance of what Ethan was trying to achieve. "Thank you," Ethan said finally, his voice full of emotion. "I don't know what to say. Your support means the world to me. Don't thank me." "Yet," his father said with a chuckle, "let's see what we can build together." Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of hope. For the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't alone in this journey. His father's support wasn't just a financial boost. It was a sign that he had truly earned his place in the world, that his choices had mattered. As the conversation ended, Ethan took a deep breath. He had come a long way since that moment when he decided to leave everything behind and start something of his own. And now, with his father's unexpected support, the future seemed brighter than ever. He wasn't just carrying on a legacy anymore. He was creating his own. With that, Ethan knew that his work wasn't done. There were still challenges ahead, but now, he had the confidence to face them head-on. The road to success was no longer just about personal achievement. It was about helping others, about making a meaningful difference in the lives of those who needed it most. As he looked out of his office window, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The foundation was just the beginning. With his father by his side and the support of those who believed in him, he was ready to take the next step, to turn his dream into something even bigger. He was no longer the son of a billionaire. He was Ethan, the founder of something that could change the world. Ethan sat in his office late one night, reviewing the latest reports from his foundation. The numbers were promising, donations were steadily increasing, and they had expanded the mentorship program to several more communities. He had come a long way from the young man who had once felt suffocated by his father's expectations. But despite the progress, there was something nagging at him. It wasn't about the foundation's success or the fact that his father had offered his support. It was about the deeper purpose behind everything he was doing. As he stared out the window, he found himself thinking back to the days when he was lost in the corporate grind, feeling empty despite his wealth and privilege. He realized that, in many ways, the foundation's work had been a way to fill that void. But now, it felt like he had to confront something even more profound. He needed to find his true voice, the one that would guide not just his foundation, but his life moving forward. It wasn't enough to simply do good work. He needed to understand the deeper why behind it all. As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Let's talk tomorrow. I have an idea I think you'll want to hear." Ethan felt a surge of curiosity. Over the past year, Rachel had been more than a colleague. She had become a close friend, someone who understood him in ways few others did. They had shared countless late-night conversations about their vision for the future, and now, it seemed like she had something important to say. The next morning, Ethan met Rachel at the cafe where it all began. She was sitting at their usual spot, a steaming cup of coffee in front of her, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've been thinking," Rachel began. "We've been doing great work with the foundation, but there's more we can do. We need to reach more people, and not just through donations. We need to empower them to take control of their own lives." Ethan leaned in, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Rachel smiled. "I mean, we need to create something bigger. A movement, not just a foundation. We've been helping people get by, but what if we could help them thrive? What if we could teach them how to create their own businesses, become leaders in their communities, and inspire others to do the same?" Ethan's mind raced as he processed her words. It was brilliant. They weren't just giving people a chance to survive. They were giving them the tools to create their own success. This wasn't just about charity. It was about real transformation. "I love it," he said finally, a sense of excitement building inside him. "But how do we even begin?" Rachel's eyes sparkled. "We already have the foundation. We've built trust in the communities we serve. Now it's time to scale that up. We can start offering entrepreneurship programs, leadership training, financial literacy courses. We can build a network of mentors who can guide these young people and help them start their own businesses. It's about creating opportunities, not just handouts." Ethan felt a fire ignite within him. This was the challenge he had been waiting for, the challenge that would take everything they had built to the next level. It wouldn't be easy. Creating a movement was a massive undertaking, but for the first time, he was ready to tackle it head-on. Over the next few months, Ethan and Rachel worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They partnered with successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, and educators to create a comprehensive program that would give underserved communities the tools they needed to succeed. They held workshops, hosted seminars, and created an online platform where young people could access resources, learn from experts, and connect with mentors who could guide them along the way. The response was overwhelming. Applications to the program flooded in, and soon, they were expanding into new cities, reaching more young people who had never before seen a clear path to success. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he watched the program take off. This wasn't just a foundation anymore. It was a movement. People were taking ownership of their lives, creating businesses, and becoming leaders in their communities. It was exactly what he had envisioned, and it was happening right before his eyes. One afternoon, as Ethan walked through one of their new program locations, a young man stopped him in his tracks. "You don't know me," the young man said, his voice full of gratitude. "But I wanted to thank you. Because of your program, I started my own business. I'm finally making my own way. I can't thank you enough." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he saw the true impact of their work. It wasn't just about providing a service. It was about changing lives, empowering people to realize their full potential. As he walked away, his heart full, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He had found his true purpose. This was what he was meant to do, and he was ready to continue fighting for it. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, he felt equipped to face whatever challenges came his way. He wasn't just the son of a billionaire anymore. He was a leader in his own right, building a future that would leave a lasting legacy. He had finally found his voice. Ethan stood on the stage, his heart pounding as he looked out over the crowd. This was the moment he had been working for, the culmination of everything he had built over the past few years. The auditorium was packed with young people, business leaders, mentors, and community members who had come together for the Foundation's first large-scale event. The theme of the evening was empowerment, giving people the tools to create their own futures, and Ethan was about to speak about how the Foundation had become more than just a nonprofit. It had become a movement. He could feel the weight of the moment, but there was no fear. The fear had long faded away, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. It had taken years of hard work, countless sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But he was finally standing in front of a crowd of people who believed in the same thing he did, that everyone deserves the opportunity to create their own path, regardless of where they come from. As he began to speak, his voice steady, he saw familiar faces in the crowd. Rachel, who had been by his side from the beginning, the young man who had thanked him for helping him start his business, and countless others who had taken the lessons they had learned through the Foundation and turned them into something real. Ethan spoke about how the Foundation's mission had evolved from helping people survive to empowering them to thrive. It wasn't just about teaching business skills. It was about teaching people to believe in themselves and in their ability to make a difference. He talked about the mentors who had come alongside the young people they served, the entrepreneurs who had donated their time and expertise, and the community leaders who had helped them break down barriers. He talked about the struggles, the times when it seemed like the Foundation might not make it, when the challenges felt too big. But then, he spoke about the victories, the young people who had gone from struggling to successful business owners, the leaders who had emerged from communities that once seemed forgotten, and the ripple effect they were all creating together. As Ethan finished his speech, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't just for him. It was for the movement that had been created, for the lives that had been changed, and for the future that was now possible for so many. Ethan smiled, his eyes scanning the crowd, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This was his purpose. This was what he had been called to do. But, as he stepped off the stage and walked into the backstage area, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his father. He hadn't heard from him much since their conversation months ago, but he had been following the Foundation's progress. Ethan opened the message and read the simple words, "I'm proud of you, son. You've built something amazing. I'd like to help take it further. Let's talk soon." Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. For years, he had fought against his father's expectations, trying to find his own way. But now, his father was offering his support, not just as a businessman, but as a father who saw what his son had created. Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still long, and there would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in his life, he felt equipped to face them. He wasn't defined by his father's legacy anymore. He was creating his own, and that was something worth fighting for. As the event came to an end and the crowd began to disperse, Ethan stepped outside into the cool night air. He looked up at the sky, feeling a sense of peace. The world had changed for him, and he knew it had changed for many others as well. He was no longer just the son of a billionaire, following a path laid out for him. He was Ethan, the founder of a movement that was changing the lives of people who had been overlooked for far too long. He had found his purpose, and with it, he had found the strength to continue building a future where everyone, no matter their background, could create their own success. In this powerful story, we follow the journey of a young man, Ethan, who breaks free from the expectations placed upon him by his billionaire father to find his own purpose in life. Through a series of life-changing experiences, including a chance meeting with a black janitor, Ethan learns valuable lessons about empowerment, purpose, and resilience. As he steps away from the corporate world and into the realm of social impact, Ethan creates a foundation that empowers underserved communities to thrive, not just survive. This journey is one of transformation and self-discovery, as Ethan embraces his new path and begins to build a legacy of change. Along the way, we witness the struggles and victories that shape Ethan's vision, from the support of his mentor Rachel to the unexpected backing of his father. The Foundation's initiatives, focused on education, mentorship, and entrepreneurship, create real opportunities for those who have been overlooked by society. The story touches on the importance of self-belief, the power of community, and the impact of taking control of one's own future. Through these black stories of empowerment and growth, Ethan not only finds his purpose, but helps others do the same. This is more than just a tale of one man's journey. It's a story of collective action, resilience, and the transformative power of community. Join Ethan as he navigates the complexities of life, creates a movement, and discovers that the greatest legacy is the one built on helping others. These black stories are a testament to the power of perseverance and the belief that anyone can create their own success, no matter their background or circumstances.